Welcome to this very special edition of the KJ Masterclass Live, the show which ensures that you profit from your time spent here with experts, either through their industry insights, information, or simply learning from them. And today we have Rodney Miles. He's a self publishing expert, consultant, and provider of author services. In over 14 years, he has helped create and publish over 300 books for clients and helped launch careers for authors and speakers, including self help, business, memoir, fiction, and children's books. Welcome to the show, Rodney.
Thanks so much, AJ. Great to be here.
You are welcome. Welcome to the show. Welcome to India in this online form. And I'm sure not just in India, but a lot of people across the globe will benefit from what we are going to talk right now. We'll learn from you about self publishing success secrets. We'll come to this, but before that, let's learn a bit more about you, about your journey, about your background, so that people, especially authors, know who they are listening to.
Sure. I think one of the more interesting things is I started when I was 40. I was in other things out of college. I kind of got discouraged from writing. So I'm trying to think of, what your audience can take from this. There are many stories about people who got into writing and being an author when they were discouraged. Or I wasn't completely discouraged, but there was an incident in college where I scrapped the whole idea and went about a whole nother life, really career-wise, until I was about 40. I was in real estate in Florida, which went bad temporarily, and had to make a decision. And it took me that long to realize, as they say in it's in a great movie I think it's called Three Idiots. He says, if you do what you love, the money will follow. And I actually wrote that down. It's a beautiful quote. And found that really to be the case. So things took off very quickly at 40, and I'm 54 now, so it's been about 14 years. And I just gravitated to it. When you really enjoy what you're doing, it makes a big difference. So I often say that in this day and age, there was an age perhaps where we all had to be farmers or soldiers or something. That's not the case in the modern world. In the modern world, you almost have a moral imperative to find what you love, because the world needs it. And you can do that with publishing. By the way, if you are in the audience and considering self-publishing a book or self-publishing more books, you can approach it quickly, or you can approach it on more of a long-term basis to fit your current lifestyle. So I very much encourage that.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, Rodney, how should people approach this writing thing? Should they go for writing a good book, should they go for writing a not so good book? Because who is going to tell them that you are a good writer or a not so good writer? Because self-publishing, that whole gatekeeper business is out of business. And
Yes.
you think you can write anything and you can publish it. There are so many things everyone knows about Amazon, Draft to Digital, Kobe, and all these things. Apple, Barnes and Nobles, name so many. You have got all these options, and there are ready-made templates. All you have to just put in some words. Even words are not required. You have got this AI, all inbuilt into so many systems. So I want to understand that. Will the reader be at the mercy of such self-publishers, or self-publishing is good publishing?
Yes, that's a great question. Self-publishing has come a long, long way in my 14 years. I consider myself second generation as far as the self-publishing industry. First generation would be influencers and I recommend you write these down and follow these people: Joanna Penn, Derek Murphy, David Gochran, Jane Friedman. There are people who have been on both sides, traditional publishing and self-publishing. And one of the major points in my first book about self-publishing, which is called The Modern Author, as part of becoming a modern author, is understanding the options that you're speaking about. You're right, there are. It can be overwhelming. Even when you have a draft that you love, it's like getting to the edge of a cliff and realizing, well, what do I do now? And when you look into it, more so these days than when I was a kid, the problem isn't lack of information. The problem is too much information very often. So, very simple way to start is with Amazon and Kindle. I don't recommend you stay there exclusively necessarily, unless you're in romance or science fiction. Even then, you want to diversify and go wide, as we say, which means publish in a way that your book's available on many different platforms, especially with an international audience. You're going to want to publish with Ingram and Drafted Digital. You named them. You nailed it. You named the publishing channels. You have a lot of options, and it's still evolving and changing, and it will continue to do so. But I think there are some things that'll remain. As far as a good book, I always think of I think it was Clint Eastwood who said, I made movies that I would want to see. And if you write for I do believe in writing for yourself, first and foremost. That's kind of an artist's approach to anything. I don't decry commercialism, though. If you want to write a book as a way, you don't have necessarily a message, you want to do what we call right to market. I don't have a problem with that either, because the only difference there is you would investigate what's likely to sell, what has a good market, and so on, and that can make your process easier to sell. Put it that way. Other than that, I think you can write whatever you like. You can write from the heart. You can write something purely for you. And in this day and age, you can find an audience, even as a self-published author, maybe especially as a self-published author. There's some big advantages in self-publishing over traditional publishing these days. So you're right. I like the list you had. That's spot on. You've got Drafted Digital, Lulu. They all have a place, and that's why they exist. But if you're starting out, you can start with Amazon, Kindle Direct Publishing. They make paperback and an ebook available. They're very, very user-friendly. Their model, to me, seems to be all-inclusive, to make it very simple and easy to create and publish a book. They then work for exclusivity as much as they can get from you, and I don't always recommend that. At that point, you want to start looking at some of your other options.
Absolutely, absolutely. There are so many other options and services are there, which is good. Everybody has a chance. But when you are self-publishing, there has to be some checks and balances, and you talk about top five things to not do when self-publishing. What are these five things? Obviously, it's not about it's not only about the do not publish because you are a bad writer.
Right. Well, the first one, two of those could be your cover and your editing. We could address both briefly. Your cover, as simple as it is, it's simply an image, really, is unfortunately or fortunately just as important as your book itself. So you can work for years on your book and then have it all fall apart for lack of a good cover. And the main things to be focused on with your book cover is that it sets the right expectations, first and foremost. You also want it to be provocative, but not so mysterious that it doesn't make any sense. This is where a little marketing acumen comes in. Your cover is actually a marketing piece. And if you consider you've got microseconds stretched out to keep somebody's attention, you will understand. Your eyes will first go to the title, perhaps, the colors, any emblem or imagery you have there. And there are a couple important factors in your cover. You want to make sure that it meets the genre expectations. That's probably one of the biggest mistakes that I see made by self-published authors. There was actually a brilliant podcast I followed for about a year. And at the end, they wrote a book, but the cover looked like young adult fiction rather than nonfiction, which it was. So they set the wrong expectations. They made a fundamental error with their cover. So you want to you want the reader to understand this is romance, or this is how-to, or this is self-development right away, instantly. A little bit of use of color and imagery has a lot to do with that. Your title can be whatever you want, really. Simple is generally better. Your subtitle is where you start to set more expectations, and and you go from there. So if you want to catch somebody's attention initially so that they even subconsciously decide to spend a little more time with your cover, and it will flow right into one element into another, from the image to the title to the subtitle to your book description. And then they might sample a few pages of your book if that's available on the retail platform, and then make a purchase decision, which other things come into mind. Another thing is the editing. So the overarching thing with these 5 not to dos are professionalism. In 2015, I gave my first public presentation on self-publishing, and I called it The Secret of Self-Publishing. And the secret of self-publishing back then, even now, more so back then, was to not look self-published. Back then, it still sort of meant unprofessional. So we would do things like come up with an imprint for your little publishing company, even if it doesn't exist as a legal entity, taking measures so that your cover is professionally designed, your blurb is professionally written. Another to-do, a big one, is editing. And the best way to understand editing, first, a lot of people, I think, get sticker shock. They get a draft written and they don't quite know where to go. There's a couple tips I can give your audience, which is really crucial here when it comes to editing. First, embrace editing. All the songs you like to listen to, all the books that you've enjoyed that have been uninterrupted, all the movies you go to where you enter a new world and in 90 minutes only exit, we're heavily edited. We're skillfully edited. You can't skip this step. You can do it yourself and you can get it all done for free, but you can't skip the step. So a couple quick tips on that. Divide it into 3 types of editing. Developmental editing, which is the 30,000-foot view of your book. It's the overarching, how does it flow? How are things organized? Do we start with a little prologue to tease the reader, to make them decide early on they're going to read this? You can look to movies and great TV shows as examples. Breaking Bad was phenomenal at setting a teaser in the beginning that would make you decide, I'm going to watch the whole show because this is too provocative, too intriguing. Next kind of editing is copy editing. The developmental editing, if you're doing it yourself, often takes place even as you're writing. Otherwise, when you hand off to an editor, the first type of editor you want is someone who's going to develop the manuscript a little bit. But you could probably do that on your own through the process. The other 2 types of editing that I recommend are copy editing and proofreading. The copy editing is more of what they call a line edit. You go line by line. You are looking for spelling and grammar, but even as much, you're looking for sentence structure. Definitely opt for the simpler if you have a choice. I always try to opt, and in my 14, 15 years, AJ, I've specialized in books to the trade audience, to the wholesale popular audience. So I haven't been involved in white papers or academic papers. It's a whole different approach when it comes to editing. With popular titles, you want it very easily assimilable. You want it very clear and a nice flow. You even want to construct that flow in the most interesting way so that people will get the most out of the book and the experience. Copy editing can also involve adding citations and footnotes and things like that. So that's probably, if you're on a budget, a very good place to find someone else to look at it, to get another set of eyes. And then the final type would be a proofread. I would do that just prior to publishing. The other thing that I would add in there, if you're doing it yourself, is what a lot of people aren't aware of is what I call a beta reader stage or pre-launch. And this is also something you can do for cheap or for free. And this is where you have some test readers read your entire book. I recommend a mix of free and paid. Um, it makes a difference. And what they beta readers do is look at a completed advanced copy of your book, and they'll give you some feedback on the overall flow, the overall structure. I usually just lay out maybe 6 questions, and it's really 3 questions as a dichotomy. What was your favorite part? What was your least favorite part? What impacted you? What was confusing? That sort of thing. So you look for things that come up, ideally with more than one beta reader. If more than one beta reader mentions the same thing, then you're onto something that should be addressed. Those are
Right,
some of the
right.
things that can go wrong.
Wonderful, wonderful, Rodney. So when does Rodney Miles come into an author's life? Before it's just an when it's just an idea, or when the book is ready and they need marketing, or is it there are a whole lot of services that are available that they may not know about.
Yeah, that's another really great point, very important point for anyone, especially with your first book. You can get a little overwhelmed by the services that are available out there. Um, in fact, in my book, I talk a lot about what the definition of terms, and the definitions have changed. And if you don't know how they've changed, it can be costly. The word publishing itself has evolved. The word bestseller has certainly evolved. Um, the word writing has evolved. It's very much changed. People are reading more than ever before, I would say, in history, because we've got a couple million books a year published. And what I mean by that, it might not be paperback books as much, but in other formats. So as far as I'm concerned, and I talk about this in my book, is a lot of readers, busy people will read with audiobooks on a treadmill or in their car. And as far as I'm concerned, that's legitimately reading. So you've got a large audience, and sometimes the type of audience in your genre will suggest what formats they probably prefer. Uh, and the options are myriad today. So the first thing to understand is the different types of publishers. You've got traditional publishers on one end and pure self-publishing on the other. You actually have a whole gradient scale in between. So there are companies that will do provide editing and a little bit of marketing, especially when it comes to marketing. That's another one of the 5 things that can go wrong, is not really understanding. Marketing in self-publishing can be very tricky. If you consider that there's 2 paths, a fast one and a slow one of those paths is going to be better for your life situation. And you have to be very careful about your marketing, because there are a lot of I've worked with some very accomplished marketers in the past 15 years who couldn't sell books. It's a very different type of thing to sell. So you need someone with a track record in that. As far as when to, join up with somebody like me, or a publisher, or a what we call a service publisher, or an editor, it really depends. I have projects. I help anywhere in the process, from before you've written anything and you have an idea, through any point in the process. I find a lot of people tend to come to me once they have most of a draft these days, but even that's not a hard and fast rule. So I can get involved any point in the process. The way I have my little one-man show practice is I do full custom projects where we do a consultation, and I figure out what you need. And if I can't help you, I tell you, I make recommendations. If I can, I custom tailor. I come back in 24 hours with a customized project proposal for you, which takes into account where you are in the process, what I think you need, and your budget, and your timeline, and your goals. Absolutely. So if you look at it, probably the best comparison is if you want to build a house, or if you own a house and you want to renovate it, you can be your own contractor. You can hire a contractor who will take care of everything, or you can be your own contractor and hire the electrician, hire the tile guy, and hire out the specific things. And you can approach it either way in self-publishing. There's a lot of freedom.
Absolutely, absolutely. Lots of freedom, and it all depends on the goal. One thing I want to understand from you, Rodney, is talking about goals here. Uh, when you want to write a book or you have written a book, the immediate place you want to go is, KDP. You just go and, upload it there, Amazon. But there is whole this new debate happening is that even if you sell a few copies or hundreds of copies, you got none of the data. And it all belongs to others. So you don't know who bought them. You don't know. You just get whatever money you get that is due to you. And this whole self publishing is moving towards actually self selling, self marketing through your own website. You can use other channels for marketing, but the audience will come to you. And every bit of data, you are not going to sell the data, but you can certainly know who are the people who actually wants to read your sort of a thing. And you can actually utilize that data to be in connect. That's the whole debate also in the social media. What good of having so many followers if I cannot, have them, have their emails or in that sense. So how do you see this aspect? Tilt Publishing, it is very strong on that. They are putting a lot of emphasis on that. They have their services. I saw that. I read their newspaper. I like them, so I came across this. I'm sure there are other people also who are propagating this sort of publishing. So self-publishing trend is slightly moving towards self-marketing, getting the data in your own hands. What would you advise such writers, such authors to look at either purely in some terms of sales to build that profile through Amazon or drop it to digital, so many other places, or should they put in a little bit of more effort and sell through their own channels so that they are able to utilize the data in the longer run?
Yes. The answer is yes. Yeah, and that's actually an aspect of self-publishing that I think is very exciting right now. If I back up for a second, I like to say if you are only published on Amazon, you work for Amazon. If you are published wide, you work for yourself. It's that simple. I guess I have a love-hate relationship with Amazon. I love it in many ways. We wouldn't be where we are if it was not for Amazon. We wouldn't have self-publishing the way we have it if it wasn't for Amazon. At the same time, there's a lot of danger in having all your eggs in that basket for many different reasons. And it's fascinating being in this business all these years, watching the way the companies behave, whether it's Amazon or Ingham Spark or even Drafted Digital and their acquisition of Smashwords.
Yeah,
Some
yeah.
of the things that go on in the industry, it's very fascinating. They after a while, you recognize they have personalities, they have business models that are quite apparent, and it helps you navigate. So, but you're 1,000% right again with the data. If you go through, well, to cut to the practical recommendation here, I suggest you look at your book sales. Everything is easier, anything is easier if you break it into component parts and understand the little parts and how they all go together. So if you look at book sales as an overarching subject and divide that, really you can divide that into channels, you can divide that into tactics. I'll give you an example with, I'll go in reverse. With tactics, making a book free, for example, is a tactic that may or may not suit or serve your goals for what you're trying to do. That is not very black and white. That's going to depend on your long-term goals, on your short-term goals, why you're writing a book, the way you see yourself as an author. It's not rocket science, but there are a few things that would even suggest. For example, book promotion sites, of which BookBub is the granddaddy and the best, and one of the few very reliable marketing tactics if you can get a book club featured deal. You have to give your book away at a discount or for free. So that may not make sense if your goal is profit, but in the short term, but it may make a lot of sense if your goal is to grow your database, just like you're talking about, AJ, because that's the difference between a one-off author who does a book for just as a goal or as a legacy or as a measure to improve one's business is very common, versus the author who's making a career out of being an author. If you're going to make a career out of being an author, you need to treat it like a business, and you need to do exactly as you said. You need to have your own customers. So when it comes to channels, and this is really, really important, always regard your first channel, and unless this is a credibility book and you're not really worried about sales, you just want it for your resume, you want to launch a speaking career, and you might not have the bandwidth or the budget to invest in the book just yet. Otherwise, always regard your first and most important channel as your direct channel through your website. That's a whole another conversation. There is a book I recommend by a woman named Morgana Best called Authors Selling Direct. Not my book, I'm not an affiliate or anything, but it really is a wonderful book on selling direct. You treat it like a business. And when I said this aspect of the business is one of the more exciting, it is because with resources like Shopify, you can have for $39 a month, you can have a very sophisticated user experience and sales platform where you look just as good, you have all the resources available to your purchaser that they have when they buy something from Amazon, maybe even better, because you can do bundles and they can track the shipment. When you sell direct, you get the data that we're talking about, namely an email address, which is much more valuable than a social media following. I've had clients who had, say, 300,000 followers on Twitter or X, and when we tried to convert that into email database, it was surprising how few come over and actually offer up their emails. So your email database, if you listen to an influencer like Mark Dawson, for example, or other authors, that's all about Mark Dawson was asked at a roundtable, what's the first thing you do when you have a new book coming out? And he had a little Mona Lisa smile, and he kind of very confidently, with his chin up, said, well, I just sent an email to my 65,000 email subscribers. If you have a database of 10,000 email subscribers or more, you're well on your way to being a full-time author if you write in the same subject. There's other aspects to selling direct. You get the data. You can if you self-fulfill, and there's another service or two that will ship immediately. Better user experience for your reader. Number one reason for refunds, as I understand, is the book's not showing up quick enough. I've had that experience with people who sold direct who made that mistake. And you have a lot more control over the process. You also get paid like immediately or in 24 hours. Understand if you're making royalties from Amazon or Ingram Spark, it's generally about 60 days. It can be 60 to 90 days before you get paid on a sale. And that can be a little frustrating. But you're exactly right. The primary thing, early on, I recognized the formula, which is list times list equals viability. So one of those lists is your backlist of books. And don't write just one book. I mean, if you haven't done any, write one book. But a wonderful program would be to write a book a year, for example. Grow that list, your backlist. The other list is your email database. If you have a social media following, that's great, but start converting them to emails. When you have an email for someone, they are your customer. And there's a reason Ingram doesn't even share where the sales came from, what retail outlet, just that you made a sale. So you're exactly right. That's at the core of growing a business as an author.
Absolutely. There is much to learn and understand about all these things from the book dude. And I'm sure a lot of people can learn from your book, The Book Dude's Guide to Self-Publishing the Modern Author. So tell us a bit about what you have covered in this book. Who is this book for? Is it for authors or is it for general people also?
Oh, anybody who wants to be an author. In fact, uh, it's almost like book zero, because before I think it include in my 14 going on 15 years, the questions that come up, the mistakes that occur, some of the things, some of the ways people have even been taken advantage of. That's not so prevalent now as it was 5 or 10 years ago, but there were people and gurus who would exploit what I call an ignorance gap, which is a change in the industry and a change in a definition, but the public person isn't aware of it yet. A good example is publisher. The word publisher that we talked about, AJ, a little earlier. I had a client come to me once, very excited. You could tell he was excited. He was lit up. He said, "A publisher's interested in my book." Now that sentence had one meaning 15 years ago, and my first question I asked very carefully was, "How much cash do they want up front?" Because in the old days, there was no cash up front. It was the opposite. If a publisher was interested in your book, it meant they knew how to sell it, they recognized its quality, and they wanted you as an asset. They'd pay you in advance, and then they would tell you how to market. They would send you on a book tour. You'd be drinking champagne in Hawaii and selling lots of books at book signings. There'd be crowds waiting for. That's the image people had of publishing that still lingers to this day. Today, a publishing deal, you've got to understand what the different kind of publishers are. I talk about that a lot in The Modern Author, and the way definitions have changed, so that you're safe. So that you're prepared and you can recognize both pitfalls and the opportunities and make some strategic decisions. It really is meant to bring anyone up to level zero, where you're on a level playing field. The next book, which is coming out soon, is on the book creation cycle, where we talk about all 10 stages in The Modern Author, because I felt that couldn't be excluded from it, but it's going to be an expansion on all those steps. So that'll actually hold your hand and guide you through all 10 stages or 10 aspects of what you do to end up with a professionally published book that looks just as good or sometimes better than what the big five are putting out on the bookshelves. So that's really what The Modern Author is about. I'm even now that it's been out a little while, I was thought about it the other day. I'm very happy with the title because it is wholly appropriate. It really does take you, it brings you up 15, 20 years in terms of understanding the self-publishing profession, which is what it's become now. And that was one of my big ahas in writing my own book, is that it really has become a profession and gets you ready for all these things where things could potentially go wrong. It protects you. And hopefully inspires you as well, because you can do it yourself.
Absolutely, absolutely. Not only your words, but also your upcoming book and so many things. You told about that at least one should write at least one book a year. You got several books too, because more than 14 years into this. So there is a lot of wisdom for you. And especially, with every 6 months, some new things are coming up. Everything is changing. Tomorrow, and more options are coming up for people who actually want to write. As I said, to be a good writer or not so good writer, want to be a bestseller, that can also be done. You do not want to write a bestseller, but a good book, that can. So many options are available. And I said, there is so much to learn from you. A lot of people who would like to learn from you about these books, about you, about publishing, get your services, wait for the upcoming book. What's the best way for them to connect with you?
The website, rodneymiles.com.
Wonderful. With this, it's a wrap on this very special edition of the KJ Masterclass Live. Thank you so much indeed for joining us.
Thanks so much, AJ. I appreciate it.